Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is wonderful to look out in this room full of friends and people that I've developed such close relationships just in the still less than 2 years as your lieutenant governor. And I want to thank people like Betty Little who've embraced me so closely. She serves on my Women's Suffrage Commission. We're commemorating the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, and she's been a great partner. Let's give a special round of applause to Betty Little. Assemblyman Dan Steck, I think we first, our paths crossed when we were doing a broadband announcement in your community, and I recall you told the story of how your son or someone in your family had to go to the local library to get broadband connectivity sometimes, and I tell that story all over the state as one of the examples of how we have to continue the governor's initiative to bring broadband, but you've been a great ally and a friend, and again, let's give it up for Dan Steck one more time. Mayor Randall, we have walked your streets many times. I cherish your library. I love it. I've done a lot of retail therapy. I always feel better after I leave here because I've stimulated your local economy more than once. My husband always says, why are these credit card receipts from all over Lake Placid? So I got to help the economy. It's my job. So I really enjoy coming up here. I think this is probably my 60th event in the North Country during that time, maybe 10th visit to Lake Placid. But it's really been a privilege. As many of us did this morning, we woke up and looked out the window, and I couldn't resist sending a picture of the lake with a beautiful crimson tree in the background. The clouds were perfect. I sent that to my children and my husband, and they said, we thought you were in New York City. I said, that was yesterday. Yesterday was New York City. Right now, I'm in God's country. It's not Iowa. This is heaven. This is heaven. So I'm delighted to be back, and as you can tell, and also the governor just cherishes what you have up here as well. I was just talking to Sandra Lee the other day, and they frequently pop up here. You may not always see them, but they come up here for some relaxation. She said, make sure you tell me where all the good antique stores are in the place. So I got to get my list to give that to Sandra. I'm so happy to be back. And I want to thank some people who are really the unsung heroes. I mean, we have the elected officials and our partners, our commissioners in state government. Thank you for crisscrossing the state with me as we host these sustainability initiatives that the governor launched. But the governor's team is just second to none. I mean, you have leadership here in the North Country with June O'Neill and Jeff Farrell, who are incredible. Mark Streb leads the team of regional reps across the state. We have Kelly Cummings, one of the governor's closest advisors, and John Majori, who's the director of policy, who really put his heart and soul into making sure that these were not just gatherings and just meetings, that there's actually true takeaways from this. And so I want to give a round of applause to all the governor's team. So what does sustainability mean? I think it depends on where you come from. To a farmer, and I'll be visiting some of our maple producers when I leave here today because I love maple syrup. To them, it's making sure that there's plentiful farmland and additional farmland and land that's only concerned about overdevelopment. So to them, sustaining means keeping the land they have. To an environmentalist, it means preserving this magnificent jewel that God has given us, known as the Adirondacks, and the beautiful pristine land and the rivers and the streams and the lakes that are just unbelievably gorgeous. To a local government official, and I spent many years as one, it's also about preserving our charming downtowns, the little hamlets that really tell a story, and each one has a unique character, and to make sure that their charm and uniqueness is not shut out by a big box store or something that would make it more homogeneous. And so those are the challenges that our small town mayors and supervisors have. Infrastructure, I have to say, I think the roads up here are incredible. DOT, you do an amazing job. I came through in the dark. I hit a few traffic lights, which is a little strange in the mountains, but that was because there's construction going on all over, almost to be done. But I've just traveled the state, and the roads up here are spectacular. And so infrastructure is important, but also being prepared when the storms come and how we respond to that. And all of you thought that the governor literally moved up here during our last major crisis, and he was here to make sure that we could rebuild fire stations and rebuild roads and rebuild bridges. So sustainability means something if you're a local engineer or an architect or a planner as well. But it's all those different voices that come together, and I love coming to your Common Ground Alliance meetings up here as well, because I see all of you who are bonded by one thought and one feeling, and that is your deep passion, a deep passion for a way of life up here that is second to none. You treasure it, I treasure it, the governor treasures it, but where do we go from here? We know where we are in 2016, but a sustainability conference allows us the time to pause for a minute and say, what is the future that we're charting going to look like? How can all of our disparate voices come together and have a common, unified vision for this region? And that's what we're going to take away from today. And you're going to have the benefit of listening to some true experts in these fields. You're going to be able to have the opportunity to give your opinions. But I need your opinions. We're not going to do this alone. We're not. The days of when Albany dictates what life looks like across the state ended with Governor Cuomo. He said that, and that's another reason why our regional economic development councils are so successful. He put these key economic development decisions in the hands of the local stakeholders. We have Gary Douglas and Tony Collins who chaired, and I'm up here constantly, or over in St. Lawrence just a few weeks ago, bringing together people from academia, from business, not-for-profits, and elected officials. And this area has been phenomenally successful. Over $420 million in grants have been funded to spur economic development in critical projects here in the North Country. So we've been successful. Yeah, let's give that a round of applause. It's a lot of money. But we also need to know how important it is to protect the environment. And the governor, I think he really gave Teddy Roosevelt a run for his money when it talks about protecting the environment with the largest acquisition of public lands in the last 100 years right up here. And I know there's some conversations about how that's used, but the governor understands it's all about balance. It's all about balance. All I know is that because of the governor, that land did not fall in the hands of people in different industries who would have destroyed it. So we have protected it. We also have to make sure there's access to it as well, and that's one of the challenges we have, but we're going to meet that challenge successfully. The role of tourism. You heard some of the statistics. Statewide tourism is just skyrocketing. I go through LaGuardia and JFK all the time, and I see the beautiful posters on the wall showcasing this part of our state. And they're gorgeous, and we're attracting more people up here more than ever before. Whether you're looking at the Adirondack region, where we're up 14.6% since 2010 when the governor was first elected, or over on the Thousand Islands Seaway area where I was last week in Clayton. What a cute community Clayton is. They're up about 15.5%. So tourism is up, people are getting the word out, and that means jobs and opportunity for people. As our senator said, people need year-round jobs. Tourism is a year-round opportunity for us in here. We know that. Pray to the snow gods. It was a little rough last year, but we need a little more snow this year. I'm from Buffalo. I can't believe I'm saying I want more snow. But we don't cherish it and use it the way you do here. So tourism's important. It's very important that we make sure that there's places for people to stay. How basic is that? But there's parts of this area that need some work on that. And I think the Regional Economic Development Council is going to put a focus on that this round. In fact, I know they are. We are going to be making some more announcements as well about infrastructure and smart growth initiatives. I'll get to that in a minute. But, there's no place where sustainable energy and environment are more important than they are in the North Country. I mean that sincerely. We've got to protect that. We've got to protect that. And with global climate change, and we feel the effects of that very deeply in an area like this, we can't afford that. Number one, as stewards of the environment, it is our moral responsibility to not just leave it the way we found it for our children, but to enhance it. So that's on that side. But if we lose that, we've lost our identity. If we let the environment slip away, that is why the governor's initiative to have 50% of the state's energy come from renewable sources by 2030, it's wildly ambitious, but he's going to get there. He will get there. When the governor says he's going to do something like that, and we will lead the nation, when they see that New York State can do this, the rest of the country will follow as they often do, and you're going to hear more about that. I also want to just mention, again, I mentioned how important infrastructure is. We're going to continue investing. As when I was a local official, we were always calling on our state and calling on our federal government. Can you give us that? We can't afford this wastewater treatment plant. We can't afford these roads. We can't afford it. Washington, just forget about it anymore. I was a member of Congress. That's the most dysfunctional institution on the planet, I'm sorry to say. So let's look to the state. We have a state that's actually functioning. You have great partners in a bipartisan way. And don't take that for granted, ladies and gentlemen. I was a local official when they were just on a collision course in Albany. There was gridlock, and they could never get a budget done on time, right? The governor has now reached a great state of equilibrium with our state legislature, where we will put the needs of the people first. We'll make sure we have on-time budgets, and we'll make sure we have funding for critical programs like infrastructure and protecting the environment. That's getting done here in the state of New York, and it didn't for a long time. We have our governor and our legislators to thank for that. So one of the other exciting things I get to do today is to announce some money. I love doing this. The governor has asked me to announce over $231,000 in smart growth grants for some of the Adirondack Parks communities. I'll just go through these quickly. But the town of Ticonderoga, $50,000 for the reconstruction of the 18th century French sawmill. Town of Osable, partnership with the Adirondack Heritage Foundation, $75,000 for the Keysville Hamlet Riverside Park. I hope these are all going on my list of places I'm going to visit. The Biodiversity Research Institute, in partnership with the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation and the Village of Saranac Lake, $50,000 for community-based trails connecting loons, lakes, and lodging. Oh, I like that alliteration. Loons, lakes, and lodging. Somebody's clever. The Indian Lake Theater, in partnership with the town of Indian Lake, $15,000 for an energy efficiency and sustainability project. $15,000. And the town of Wilmington, $40,000 for an alternative wastewater system for economic development. So, and that's on top of, let's give a round of applause. And that's on top of $400,000 that our governor just announced back in April. So don't tell the rest of the state this, but you're getting a lot of support for these initiatives. So I'm going to wrap up by just my next order of business is to introduce someone who actually lives in this area, who calls this area part-time home. And we've got to work on getting you up here full-time, like someone that, you know, if you grew up around hockey, and I'm from Buffalo and around the border with Canada, hockey's a way of life. You have to love hockey to live where I come from. One of the most successful goaltenders in history is actually sitting in this room. I think that's pretty cool. And I have to get your autograph before I go back home, or I'm going to get in trouble, Mike. You know, he was a three-time NHL All-Star and Stanley Cup champion, three-time Olympian, winning the silver medal in 2002, gold medal in 1996 World Cup of Hockey. And what also impressed me, he did not just go into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He also decided to do a little bit of a career shift and go to Yale University and study, get this, and I love the combination, ethics, politics, and the economy. So you are someone we are looking forward to hearing from. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor of mine on behalf of Governor Cuomo to welcome Mike Richter to our Sustainability Conference.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I want to thank the governor for putting these events on. There's 10 of them around the state, and it's pretty meaningful gatherings. There's a lot of great information that you'll see this afternoon, and I won't blab too much here so we can get to that. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for the kind words. Interesting stuff. I would suggest staying and listen to you more than me. I am not going to give out any money today other than buying Roby a drink after this, Town Supervisor. Interesting kind of place that we are right now. I came in the dark last night, and you could kind of squint and see that the fall was just about peak. And I don't travel a lot, but I've been around a few different places, and I'll get into some good examples of sustainability. But this place is an absolute jewel. And when I first bought my house here, the woman I bought it from was 82 years old. And I was making small talk. I said, wow, you know, you must have seen a lot of change here. And there was kind of an uncomfortable silence. And she said, no, I'm looking at the same basic scene off of my dock that I did in the 1920s when my father bought this place. And that says something. I mean, that's why people want to come up here, because there's been that balance of growth and respect for what you have here, and it's a very, very special place. So honored to be here. There's a story that illustrates the idea of perspective that I want to start with, and it goes like this. A snail was walking down the street, and he was mugged by two turtles. The policemen were called, and they came and said, what happened? And the snail said, I have no idea. It all happened so fast. And in terms of the Earth, humankind has come to the scene very recently and has changed the natural world. Some would say mugged very, very rapidly. Many would say that this is the price for progress, but it's become clear that true progress must support our natural systems. So you might ask what someone who spent a good portion of their life stopping hockey pucks have to add to a sustainability summit. And in a word, it is potential. I went to high school down the street here. I know we have some Northwood kids here in the audience. And you had to get a senior quote for your yearbook. And I wrote a quote down from Aristotle. Good in any organism is using that which he has been endowed to its fullest potential. And this is what sports is about. And it's what we strive to fulfill every day in our personal and professional lives. In a related way, it's the inspiration for the company that I currently work. But this concept of reaching your potential as an individual and across society is exactly what the movement towards sustainability and a sustainable economy helps us to achieve. Because the environment is not about hugging trees, it's about people. Our economy, our entire society depends on the natural world. Environmental issues are more about the birds and the fishes. It's a compromised environment undermines our economy, erodes social justice, national security, and diminishes our quality of life. So someone once described me as a surprising environmentalist as an athlete. And I would say anybody who is alive across the political spectrum has an interest in the quality of water that we drink and the air that we breathe. Nike founder Phil Knight once said, if you have a body, you're an athlete. And I agree. I would add that if you have a body, you're an environmentalist. But especially as an athlete, I came to appreciate that idea of the environment, my health and my performance, right? What I eat, what I drink, when I go to sleep. I don't know any athlete, we just watched the Olympics, who is not concerned about that. If you want to maximize your potential, if you want to maximize your performance, your health is the foundation of that. And so it is for a society. If we want to reach our potential, the health of the natural environment, which influences our health, has to be at its highest. So when we speak of the environment as something separate from ourselves, we're missing the point and doing a disservice to the idea of sustainability. We are in nature and cannot be divorced from it any more than we can stop breathing. So my company was founded on this concept of filling potential. The common thread, of course, is that performance, and we focus on buildings. In a nutshell, we change light bulbs. It does not sound exciting, but the massive waste that happens in the built environment is an enormous opportunity waiting to be filled. Any form of waste is inefficient. Anything under maximum performance makes reaching potential impossible. So we're trying to make these commercial buildings a lot more efficient. It's measurable, it's repeatable, and it improves the performance of the building substantially, just changing out light bulbs between 30 and 80%. It's avoided costs, it's avoided waste, it's avoided pollution. And I think part of the motivation was, in the beginning, we were looking at athletic buildings. Given my background, it was a good place to start. And we were amazed to look at some of the highest performing athletes and go across any sector, highest performing employees. And you do everything you can to make them function as high as you possibly can. The coaching techniques, sports nutrition, equipment, they're all these things wrapped up, yet they're competing in these horribly inefficient buildings. Coaches, managers, CEOs rarely accept such poor performance in any other aspect of the organization, and they were kind of surprised when you brought that to attention to see it for what it is. It's waste, it's inefficiency. So that's where I've been focused. The energy conservation measures now include solar and increasingly will be battery storage. But you think about just in the built environment, 60% of the greenhouse gases come from the built environment. In a dense city like New York City, it's over 70%. 80% of the building stock is going to be there in the next 20 years. So the efficiency retrofits are going to be massively important. Improving the infrastructure, as we mentioned before, is crucial. These buildings are not going to be torn down, but you're going to have to repipe them and make them really better with off-the-shelf technology. We don't have to wait for Elon Musk to come up with some whiz-bang technology. It's there now. It'll continue to improve, but we have to continue to improve these buildings. So just in In New England, there's 700,000 commercial and educational buildings. That represents $6 billion in annual energy wasted. This is not a sacrifice, ladies and gentlemen. This is an opportunity waiting to happen. So I'm focused on that built environment, and that's wonderful. But the worries and the opportunities for improving efficiency go across the board. And I'll just give you a couple, maybe a little bit of a reality check. I've never been at a conference that does not preach about how great we're doing, and we're doing phenomenal things. We've come a very long way, but we have a very, very long way to go. And I think you're living right now in an area here that is a great example of where we need to be. But let's talk about fresh water for a second. Freshwater systems encompass a huge range of habitats, rivers, lakes, and wetlands. The world's freshwater systems are so degraded, its ability to support human, plant, and animal life is in great peril. By 2025, at least 3.5 billion people, or nearly 50% of the world's population, will face water scarcity. Species have been disappearing at 50 to 100 times the natural rate. Estimated 34,000 plant, 5,200 animal species face extinction. Between 10 and 20% of all species will be driven to extinction in the next 20 years. These aren't stats meant to bring you guys down, but to talk about why we're here. Oceans cover 70% of the, oops, that's not an ocean, guys. This I know. Someone's gonna be fired and it's gonna be me. Rainforests, every year, at least 50 million acres of rainforest are being lost. That's an area the size of New England, Wales, and Scotland combined. This is not just vacant land. This is home to 10 million plant and animal species. Okay, that looks like a dry area, still not an ocean. Desertification, nearly 70% of the world's dry lands are degraded. This means reduction in crop yields, loss of plants, and deterioration of the quality of foodstuffs for human beings. Our energy has risen 70% since 1971. The consumption and global energy consumption, annual CO2 emissions have risen by almost 50% since that time. Transportation consumes about half the world's oil production. There'll be well over 1 billion vehicles on the world's roads by 2025. Think about this. In China, there are only 8 vehicles per 1,000 persons. India, 7 vehicles per 1,000 persons. In the United States, there's 750 vehicles per 1,000 persons. The third world is trying to live like the United States. It is going to be a massive, massive drain on our natural resources. Population in 1957, when Governor Cuomo was born, the world's population was 2.8 billion. It actually says 2.8 million here. He is not that old. That's a long time ago. 2.8 billion in 1957. 1980 down the street, when we won the gold medal, 4.4 billion. A March 2016 consensus pegged the world's population at 7.4 billion. We are adding 200,000 people to the planet every day, 140 people every minute. I mean, these are crazy stats. That equals over 70 million more people every year. The same combined population as California, Texas, and Washington. So you understand that the drag, that the pull, that the degradation of our natural systems is going to be immense when there's that many people on the earth. So I can go on, but the point is clear. There's more people chasing fewer natural resources. We came to the problem, innocently enough. A scientist from NRDC said a smart thing. He said, look, there's been millions of people over many, many years doing small acts that sometimes we didn't even know were wrong that got us to where we are today. And what we're trying to do now is have billions of people do small acts that are sustainable in a very short period to counteract what we've done. It's a very difficult task, but it can be done, and it is being done. So I'm just going to go over a couple really interesting observations that I had. I got back from Africa last week. I was in Manyak Wildlife Conservation Trust. It's a 850,000 acre, it's a gem in northern Africa, a little bit north of Nairobi. What interests me about this, it's very, very similar to the approach that they're taking to sustainability as what we have here in the Adirondack Park. Bill McKibben called this one of the great hopeful places on earth, and it truly is. And you're starting to see this model of people living with nature, not apart from it, and this balance that's so very difficult to strike, but be struck in other places. The region I visit is home to over 25,000 indigenous people known as the Samburu. They're nomadic people, they cattle herd. This is what took place when poachers came. In about 1970s and 80s, there was a severe ivory poaching crisis. By 85, there's no recorded elephants remaining in the Matthews Range, so it's up north. And you say, well, that's a terrible thing. You hate to lose a species like that. But what you have to understand about these key species is now the trees aren't being felled. Now the grasses have nowhere to go and aren't protected, so they do not grow. When the dry season comes, there's literally no place to go. By 1995, 3,000 elephants and rhinos were killed by poachers over that 20-year period. The surrounding ecosystem began to degrade, as you see. And this is a before and after they started their elephant protection program. The elephants came back, some of the other species came back, the grasslands came back. Consequently, the violence that had ensued from the lack of carrying capacity from the area changed from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. When the Conservation Trust was established in '95, it started to bring peace to the region. So the indigenous people started realizing, oh my gosh, I cannot take a tusk for short-term game or turn a blind eye to it. I have to start policing this area to make sure the sustainability of my region is intact, because it's going to affect not just the elephants, but me, my family, my community, my way of life. So they saw the long-term value of the animals that brought to the ecosystem. Change started to happen. This is the first elephant rehab place. It's basically a hospital for elephants. And if you can imagine, this thing is circular, and these elephants come in, they like to touch each other apparently with their trunks. And they all come in there like a garage, and they're able to be rehabbed in this place. It's the first of its kind in Kenya. So now if you're a poacher, you might find yourself on the other end of the hunting experience and find so interesting. The elephants started coming back, the grass took root. Here is a picture not of a dead elephant, but this is an elephant that was shot. While we were there, he came and he was sick. They literally come back to this region because they know it's a place that they can heal. He was shot twice. They don't know whether it was poacher attempt or just self-defense, but he had infection, and it was starting to get weakened. They tranquilized him. They gave him penicillin. You can see that's the bullet hole that has pus coming out of it. It's extraordinary. The penicillin, these guys apparently react to them very, very well, and that elephant, as we speak, is up and healing and doing very, very well. I just learned yesterday. So the lions, the buffalo, the giraffes, the impalas all came back. These Samburu warriors, so there's an elephant in its natural habitat with the grasslands that they helped create. The zebras are back, the other wildlife are back. And so basically what you have here is the Adirondack Park. You have a lot of ecotourism. There's two Samburu warriors. That's me on the left, if you can't tell. I am not indigenous to that region, but they know now that these guys are now eco-tourists. They're not warriors. I asked one of the persons I met there, what's the difference between now and the poaching days? And he said, the big difference is, and this is a quote, now we can sleep with our shoes on. They know that the raids from neighboring villages are a thing of the past. A healthy ecosystem means a thriving local economy and ultimately peace. Why? Because when the carrying capacity of that area, as you saw, was so diminished, now you're starting to steal cattle from someone else. And stealing cattle, apparently, is basically declaring war. I will die if I don't have my cattle. And so a healthy ecosystem means peace, and that is the case all over the world. A little closer to home, I'm sure many in the room know this is a stunning example of the value of ecosystem services, the New York City water filtration system. It's, they say, one of the largest projects that nobody really understands. I hope somebody does, because we're certainly drinking it. New York City has been the envy of most cities across the 20th century. Their water has been particularly high quality. The growth of New York continued through the 70s and 80s, and a new system was needed. However, instead of, so this is what people think about New York City reservoirs. There you have it in the middle of Central Park, 850 acres, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and it's not even part of the story. The real story is upstate. They were looking to build close to $8.5 billion filtration, water filtration. And so they said, well, we're going to have to find this money, and we're going to have to start charging people more for the water in New York City. What do we do? Well, they went upstate. And if you can see this map, I'm sorry, it's a little bit tight, but there's two basic places, the Croton system and then the Catskill region. You have this pristine water. This is what you should be thinking about when you think about New York City water. Instead of putting a filtration system in is just genius in its simplicity. They bought land and said, we are going to let nature filter our water, which it does naturally. And here you have it. If you think back on that first slide I showed you about the pipe going into the water, that's what's not happening here. So the ecosystem services is worth more than $8.5 billion. They spent about $1.5 billion on land to preserve the water, piped it down in these absolutely stunningly large aqueducts, and you end up with some of the cleanest drinking water on the earth. You have ecosystem services that save cash, and you still have great fishing and beautiful places to look at, and to, nature to experience. So that is a win-win-win. When they say really the farmers upstate started making money becoming environmentalists. They're saying we are now farming water rather than developing our land. So that is an example of ecosystem services and how improving the environment, or at least maintaining the environment, isn't just for the birds and fishes. Once again, it is for people. A final example is this high-performance rink that a group of us are working on at the NHL. And this is an interesting idea when you think about it, because NHL has kind of been tagged with trying to increase participation like all sports. It's in their self-interest to get more kids playing. But they're concerned about diversity and inclusion as well. It's not a small issue for them. And the game of hockey was born in the frozen lakes and ponds in North America. It's sort of close to the heart. It's the DNA. That's what they say. We're born outdoors. Today, ice is forming later and melting earlier. So what was once free and democratic is quite expensive and becoming basically an elite sport. I play in the frozen ponds and lakes. This is from up here. I'm not sure which lake this is, but this may even be Mirror up here, and it's fantastic. It's open to anybody. You get a pair of skates, you go out and play. It's not organized, but this is where the icons of my sport started. Guy Lafleur on the frozen St. Lawrence. This is not an expensive big thing to do. Get a pair of skates, go play. You put boots down, you have a net. Even places like Northwest Territory in Canada, there's an incredible article in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago. Now they require artificial ice because the ice is forming later and melting earlier. So what was once free is now gone. The man-made ice, we all have been in these buildings, I suppose, around here, is incredibly expensive to maintain. So it's not just the upfront costs like that filtration plant. It's the ongoing maintenance and operation of these things. It can be $500,000 a year to maintain. What does that mean for the local kid? That's expensive ice time to rent. So a group of architects, engineers, and operation managers are working on two solutions. Obviously, upgrading existing infrastructure is the best thing to do. You're recycling them. But the other thing is trying to find a building whose envelope and on-site generation means that it's an energy net zero building. And not an easy thing to do and a very expensive thing to do. It can be 30 to 40% more money up front. But the holding costs can be cut in half or maybe even eliminated altogether in terms of its energy, because it's producing on site and it's halving its demand. So when you start to look at that, and you are seeing solar panels going up on buildings, that's half the equation. The other one is it designed up front, and is the infrastructure inside as efficient as it can be? And basically what you have is a refrigerator in these places with an open door, and that's going to change. And this project will start to take form probably later this year. But NHL Green pats himself on the back for this because of the diversity and inclusion, but it comes down to a very simple thing. Less waste, means that less cost. Less cost means more inclusion. Socioeconomically, geographically, more kids can participate. And that is a bit of a metaphor for society. I put together this somewhat lame equation, but the upfront costs there, UC plus HC, holding costs of a sustainability, has to be less than the upfront costs and the holding costs of an inefficient building. And that holding cost of the inefficient building is really what we're talking about when we're talking about sustainability. What is the long-term viability of any project, whether it's water, whether it's the sombrero with the elephant population, or whether it's a hockey rink. And great things are happening. You're starting to see this. Lots have been made of Governor Cuomo's 50% by 2030 clean energy standard. That mandate means that more renewable projects will be built in North Country. There's 3 wind farms currently operating near the Canadian border. I showed you those pictures of a lot of the environmental waste, and it is a depressing picture, but there's unbelievably good examples of where we need to go, and many of them are happening right in here in New York State.
The NYPA's Preservation Power Program, low-cost hydroelectric to several large employers. Hydro is New York's largest renewable resource. We're taking advantage of that. There are 7 communities in the North Country that receive planning grants for microgrid development through New York Governor's Prize Program. Clarkson University is already spearheading development of a microgrid. That's exciting stuff. Jefferson Lewis Solar Project will provide schools and municipalities with 2.5 megawatts of renewable power and save $120,000 annually in energy costs. So this is not all sacrifice. We are actually putting money in our pocket to do these things. So again, this is not greenwashing. This is not sustainability for sustainability. It is truly improving. I mean, I would rather use the term than sustainability, maybe use the term bettering. It's a measurable, repeatable, scalable advantage for the bottom line, and crucially important for the ecological realities that we face. And again, it's about performance. The healthier our natural world, the better for us to reach our potential. I'll close with a quote by the poet Rilke. He states, "What we choose to fight is so tiny," and goes on to speak of the courage it takes to take on bigger challenges. "Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively, by constantly greater beings." I believe this applies to how we must look at our most difficult projects and problems, right? So we can't say global warming is a big problem. Food shortages are a big problem. I can't do anything. We all obviously can do something about it. It may not solve it overnight, but it's going to move the needle, and that's what these events that were gathered here today are set to do. There will be sacrifices made. There will be misses along the way, but there are huge payoffs to getting it right, and the consequences of doing nothing are way more expensive than any equation that I could possibly do. Ask the people of Flint, ask the people of Dimock, PA. The consequences of not taking care of our environment, of not moving towards sustainability, are incalculably high. Can't happen. The United States is the most powerful nation on earth, and New York is probably its most important state. We have the capacity not only to improve the region, but we're capable of changing the world. This bettering through sustainability helps our society reach its potential. As Aristotle would point out, this is a good thing. I want to thank you for having me here today, guys.